In certain places on the planet, the structure of society, which was established more than 37 centuries ago, is still working. Indeed, reading the title, many people will immediately think that we are talking about the Muslims of Bharat, or the countries of the former British colony of India. After all, it is known that there are quite a lot of followers of this religion, and these followers are allowed, if you have the means of course, to have as many as 4 wives per man, and there were concubines before. But wait a second, no, we are talking about the adherents of Hinduism, since especially before in our human history, belief system was the motivation for action of the entire groups of people, then cities, and then states. How so? Do they have only 1 wife each? Is it really the case? 99% of Hindus do have 1 spouse each, and it's a fact that there is a caste of Brahmins who, from the period of the formation of castes, from the first half of the Bronze Age, had very big amount of rights in relations with the rest of the population. Well, let's ask why. After all, they were directly connected with the gods. They, in essence, practiced a cult. They could afford many things, including many life partners without judgment or misunderstandings within their society. And the custom associated with the marriage phenomenon was called Kulinism. And specifically to that phenomenon, this episode is dedicated. You're watching Flip Side of History, and now together we will delve into many aspects of this kind of marriage. Let's continue this episode. The family relations forms of Indo-Aryan ethnic groups since antiquity. A branch of the Indo-Iranians also went towards the Indus, and then on and on. The entire process started around the 17th century BC and lasted for many centuries forward. The early colonists who created a number of principalities, Rajastans or Rajstans, tried to preserve genetic purity, as well as the preservation of religion and undoubtedly traditions. For this purpose, the Vedas were created. In short, these are hymn books as well as holy papers transmitted within the priestly caste, namely Brahmins, which also prescribed from ancient times the preservation of a core social structure of society. Over time, even writing appeared in 5th century BC. These people, the Brahmins, also preserved the language of the time when South Asia was just colonized, Sanskrit, and then the traditions were preserved by writing it. In its core, Hinduism is based on the ancient religion of the Vedas, or Vedism. Cults of the relict population grew on the Vedic backbone, and also some precepts of Buddhism, which, by the way, was also born in Bharat. As a result, it turns out that the main stratum of population in Vedism, the Brahmins, automatically extended their spiritual power in Hinduism, the belief prevailing in many areas of South Asia. Any Varna of South Asia is, first of all, Yati, or Jati, literally meaning by birth. Was the status of a Brahmin prescribed in the Vedas as a man who had the right to many wives at a single time? Was it? Not really, because the first Brahmins did not appear until the 12th century. But this is when it comes to Bengal. Brahmin is everything. One touch with this divine being is the key to good luck and health, especially if you're an individual of the fair sex in the lands where, in many cases, very sadly, but girls were simply disposed of at their birth. Let's talk about the following. Kulinism. Etymology, early and much later definition. Kulin Pratha, in Western manner simply Kulinism, is translated from Sanskrit as the practice of Kulin, where Kulin itself is just a collection of all the rites which are adherent to the caste. So the etymology of the term doesn't explain anything to us to interpret it in a specific way. What matters is respect for birth-given rights. Other Varnas also have their own Kulin Pratha. Kshatri, warriors starting with the Raja. Vaishya, free community members engaged in agriculture, trade, and crafts. And Shudra, people who, by ethics of limited rights, could only do the dirtiest possible work. There is one thing we can't miss, is this paradox. On the one hand, a Shudra could not rule, fight in an army, or accept donations for the gods, since he was from the caste which was not eligible for that. On the other hand, a Kshatri and a Brahmin were not allowed to clean restrooms and alike. Thus, it makes it a double-edged rule. This means that even a Raja, prince, could not have several wives, only Brahman himself. More late nuances of the social phenomenon. Moreover, in English rule times, a Brahmin could become a Kulin, the owner of all the rights that are attributed to the Brahmins, at least in the 15th generation. That is, polygamy was seen as an art passed down from father to son for many centuries. Leftists or non-noble by birth Brahmins did not count. Well, in general, having passed through the British prism of what is considered normal, the combination of Kulin Pratha became a set of Brahmin rites. After all, the colonists of the United Kingdom, having finally taken possession of the Indian subcontinent, began to fight against the practice, deciding to make another Europeans out of all Indians, no matter the caste, namely monogamous people. The status of women in the Kulinistic family. The most extraordinary thing is that a Brahmin, in spite of the fact that he was looked up to by everyone around among other Hindus, could drag out a poor existence. Everything depended on the wealth within the locality under his care, because the Brahmins could live exclusively on donations from common people, including money, food, and other goods. That is another contradictory thing. Somewhere in a poor geographic region, both a Brahmin and his spouses were living in poverty. Many Shudras could look richer. People paid well to them after they cleaned the sewers and village toilets. When an old Brahmin died, his soulmate in physical life dreamed of living with him. Otherwise, she had to somehow survive on her own, since faith could not be betrayed by any means. People would find out and condemn even outside of that village. And what if she also had children? And what if a lot of them? Another way of phrasing it, it was truly an authentic dead end. The farther people made off from traditional values, the less interested they were in the fate of wives of Brahmins. In ancient times, the whole settlement was fully prepared to feed and cherish those Brahmanical widows, who still did not want to go to the funeral pyre. As a general rule, they were mothers of young children, so the children would not be left without a mother. But that's not the whole spectrum of problems. In the 19th century, such poor souls were finally allowed to get married. But you have already understood that these rules are exclusively for the people of the Brahmanical race, and they comprised a very small percent of the population within a certain areas. Also, men live less than women. That is, these women had no choice other than to go to the harem for the second time, where there is by then a wife. Men openly took advantage of this. Women literally swam into their arms. Such people felt like they are great Rajas or Brahmins themselves, but obviously at home. As you may have guessed by now, these were primarily the daughters and granddaughters of the Brahmins themselves. Compared to the other castes, the Brahmins could be counted on fingers, and we are talking about not so small areas. Can you imagine? There are only 2 of them in certain areas in India. Well, without a doubt, the family of one of these patriarchs will pass off all their daughters as descendants of the other, and on the contrary, the other will transfer the maidens to the family of the first. Thus, the purity of the aristocratic caste was preserved. Furthermore, in the south of the Indian subcontinent are most of the Brahmins. As the second Brahmin clan was not found there, all the daughters, descendants, were sent to the north of the Indian subcontinent, somewhere in the middle of the division of the Indian subcontinent, to Indo-European peoples of this region, rather than keep them only among Dravidian peoples. Well, you might be curious about this. What if Brahmanical virgins did fall into the hands of representatives of other castes, or even the caste of untouchables? That's where it all ended for her. If a girl gave birth to a child with someone of untouchables, for instance, then she is already a cut slice for the members of the top of society. In order to be on the safe side, or to accustom them to the right sort of husband, girls were given away as wives, as it should be in Indian society, with an expensive dowry, very long before puberty. Many years before puberty. Otherwise, after the age of 13, it will be too late. She will fall in love with someone wrong and spoil herself. This understanding of life and growth of one's mindset is strict in India. Did the Brahmin family run out of free suitors? At that time, the daughters were distributed among their families in the so-called second circle. That is, each of the clan already had several wives. Well, mostly we talked about the center as well as north of India, but what about the southern part? And in the south, where people of the highest Vedic sort became generally a rarity, there were even a lot of girls in the harem of decrepit old men. What difference does it make if he is a Brahmin, despite him being outwardly old, physically weak man? It means that grace and spiritual connection still is coming out from him. Was this custom faced with confrontation? What is happening today? The answer is a huge yes. Back in the days of the British, at the end of the 19th century, in the colony of India, polygamy was forbidden by official law. However, you can't get enough inspectors for every village to check who complies with the law and who doesn't. More so, there are such corners where even a local policeman cannot and could not set a single foot. People who live far from the centers of modern, globally reachable civilization cannot be forbidden to observe traditions that date way back to the 17th century BC. the time of the appearance of Indo-Iranian colonists who first formed Indo-Aryan alliances of tribes and then ethnic groups. The wife of a Brahmin, a person of the highest caste, is very honorable, no matter what the authorities might say. If in the other states of India Kulinism is an isolated case for each given state, then in Bengal, today it's called Bangladesh, there are more Brahmin harems. We know that majority of population in Bangladesh today is Muslim, so it's difficult to determine whether a polygamist is a Muslim person or a Hindu person. It's especially evident when modern descendant of the Brahmanical caste is no longer in a hurry to dress in special vestments. As a postscript, it remains to add that castes in the Indian version Varnas exist not only in the countries on the territory of the former colony of India. Some traditional classes are preserved on the reservations of the native populations of North America or Latin America and on the islands of Melanesia. In contrast to the countries of South Asia, the official legislation of these named regions did not affect the observance of the traditional rights of representatives of the priestly caste, to say the least, at all. But it's in Melanesia that the upper stratum is not the priests, but the chiefs, the ariks. And everywhere, the lordolatry of a member of the higher degree is accompanied by the readiness of a large number of women to become the halves of the alpha character, though he may not be physically attractive and not be distinguished by bravery. Women are the ones who are more inclined to guard old traditions. They are the ones who become victims of their own inclinations, as you have understood from the material presented. Well, of course, to put it simply, it's not about the young girls, but about the mothers or grandmothers who endured and told the younger generation to, the position of upper caste women is highly determined. You can only live in this way and not otherwise. Thank you for watching our episode. Do not hesitate to subscribe to Flip Side of History and also leave a like. By the way, if you liked this episode, take a look at our other episodes. For now, see you later.